We've conquered all of Europe. We're never gonna stop. From Palestine to Turkey, we've won the fucking lot. But Paisley and the Shankly, the fields of our field gold. We are all supporters, and we come from Liverpool.
G'day everyone, welcome to the training ground. As you saw there, our thumbnail that briefly made an appearance there. I actually just really love putting that up there. Just a really nice graphic there. My name's George and I'm joined as always by Pete. How you going, Pete?
Very good, Georgie. I'm excited for this one today, actually.
Yeah, so this is going to be a kind of like a post-Norwich, pre-Burnley training ground. So we had a really great show last week. Those who would have watched live would have really enjoyed it. Pretty much everything we covered, Pete, ended up unfolding before our eyes. So it was a real shame that we had to take that show down. We had some video clips that we were kind of unsure if we could use them. So we just decided to be safe and maybe leave that show to sit with the ages and just it's like a legend, Pete. It's like a Greek myth.
Yeah, so prove we said those things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we could always just show the content, but we thought we would do a similar show, but we'll just try our best not to use video links. Although that stuff is really, really helpful visually. We're just going to try our best to maybe use stats and screenshots to portray the things that we want and to convey the things we want rather, as opposed to using video footage. So what we thought we might do is start this off by looking at the win against Norwich, just some things that stood out for us. There was something, Pete, that I just wanted to we might start with you because I'm sharing the wrong screen at the moment as a technical thing. I'm pretty sure your screen is ready to go. I think you've got something like maybe a couple of screenshots from Norwich, I'm assuming. Just some things that we found really interesting. So I might just put that up now, and I'm going to get Pete to just tell us what he found interesting about the game. So as you guys know, Training Ground is where we take a really, really deep dive into bits and pieces statistically from the games and also looking at positional and tactical things that we see on the pitch. So it's a combination of looking at tactical analysis through statistics and also looking at the game just from the naked eye. So as we can see here, we're looking at something from the game with the naked eye. Pete, what are we looking at?
So this is something that we had discussed in our pre-season training ground conversations that we had in terms of, like I said, this could have been happening this whole time and maybe I missed it. I'm not too sure. But I noticed in particular against Bologna where our left fullback and the right fullback, in which I'll show you in one of the next couple of clips that we had found, the fullback is a lot more narrow when the ball is on the other side. And that's something that, for me, I don't think I've ever seen Andy Robertson, for example, because he's the only one who's played for the past year and a half in that position, but like rolled in so far centrally. And we discussed this earlier that we said this could be a really kind of, nothing like, revolutionary, but like a way to prevent counterattacks. And a lot of the counterattacks will come through the middle parts of the field. And then maybe that's why we have a fullback, in such a central space.
Can I ask you, Pete, because it's really interesting here that what we're so used to seeing is the big switch, whether it's from Trent to Robbo. We've also seen Robbo, I actually remember him using his right foot once, or maybe it's Trent using his left foot. I don't know. I swear I've seen Robbo use his right foot once to switch the ball to Alexander-Arnold. But that's kind of the advantages of having your fullbacks really, really wide. Would you assume that perhaps Tsimikas, if Trent did get the ball, he would probably do a shuttle to try and make himself wider?
Oh, 100%. I think this is more so because we're not in possession. Mm-hmm. I think with the second we win the ball, you almost can guarantee he spreads out into the wider position. And don't forget, obviously, because you can kind of just see him there on the corner of the screen, Sadio Mane. I think he'd obviously be the prime target if we do win the ball there because he's on what's called the weak side because there's no one there. And then as the ball travels towards Mane, that's when Tsimikas or Robertson, whoever would be there, Milner, maybe this week, who knows, kind of just bombs on and creates the width.
Can I ask you very quickly, what were we doing previously? Where would Robertson have been? I mean, can your mouse cursor kind of show us on that
Can you
on that screen?
can you see my mouse moving at all?
No, I can't. Doesn't
No,
matter.
you can't. That's fine. I just
Oh
think
no, now I
that
can. Now I can. I could just then. No, that was good.
well, I think what you'd see him, he wouldn't be so much here. I think you'd actually
Yeah.
see him more square off, so in line with Van Dijk, but in a wider position. Just so in case,
Okay.
as you mentioned earlier, he does, can make that run forward in the wider area. But this for me is new.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and by the way, we did mention that in our preseason shows, so we did notice that there was a little bit of an inverted movement. Now, Pep Guardiola is someone that's been lauded for using inverted fullbacks. Now, like you said, this is not in an attacking sense; it's in a defensive sense.
Yeah.
But we do notice Tsimikas is a bit more of a dribbler, a bit more close control. Robertson loves to knock the ball and run. So it could also we might be able to see examples of Tsimikas perhaps even becoming a bit more inverted. Although we did see him a lot playing wide. But onto the next screenshot.
Well, it's the exact same with this time on the other side. So, and normally Trent is our go-to guy in the wide areas because I haven't seen a guy deliver a ball like Trent since David Beckham. So it's something that, even him sacrificing his strength in terms of the wide areas so he could deliver the ball, rolling in central to potentially, again, prevent a counter-attack because you can see the Norwich player there on his own in the middle. So if somehow the ball gets to him, Trent is the closest player to prevent the counter-attack.
And it's interesting because we were talking about as well a little bit in preseason, the idea that Trent is a right fullback, but like we always say with formations, it's flexible once you're playing. And Jurgen Klopp really hates being asked about formations because he's like, it doesn't matter. It's about zones and whatnot. Now, Trent there is kind of almost acting like a right defensive midfielder. Not to say that that's exactly where what he's playing, but a lot of people are calling for Trent to move into midfield. But it's funny. I think Klopp has augmented the way he's playing fullback so that he kind of acts like a midfielder anyway.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this could be a load of shit, so to speak. We're just not making it up, but maybe we're overthinking it. But like I said, have you ever seen Trent so narrow ever?
Yeah, I mean, whether I've paid attention to it or not, I mean, we are used to seeing him further forward and at least a bit wider for sure.
Because imagine how he picks up the ball. Look at that straight line of Salah on his own kind of thing. So I just think maybe we're starting to plan a little bit more forward thinking in terms of, look, we know what we can do with the ball. It's more so we get hurt, obviously in counter-attack situations because we rely on the two centre-backs because they're so athletic and strong and dominant in the air that they'll kind of nullify the danger. But maybe now it's that next level of what happens if this happens. As we've noticed last year, obviously, again, last year is a very hard year to compare things to because it's a season that we've never, ever, ever seen. But I'd like to think that we learnt from it and that even though we have our centre-backs back for now and everyone's back, how can we prevent some of the things that happened? And maybe this is one of those situations where we use the fullbacks to kind of create a narrow blockage, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And even this picture here, even like it's something that our defensive line, the ball is central. Obviously, danger is the goal when the ball is central. From Trent to Tsimikas, or as the commentator said, Chimikas. It's what 10, 15 meters. And again, that's something for me that I don't normally see our back four so close together.
Is it something that perhaps you think that maybe Van Dijk also helps with because he's actively, it's hard to play the game as a centre back and then also organise 10 other players on the field. I mean, maybe leave the goalkeeper out of it, although I wouldn't be surprised if Van Dijk's chatting to his goalkeeper as well, but at least 9 or 8 other players. But Van Dijk, we know, best centre back in the world. He immediately came into Liverpool and without touching the ball, immediately transformed their defence. So this could very well be something that the Van Dijk presence provides, but at the same time, if it's something that we haven't seen in this degree, it could be something Klopp has worked on.
Now, where I can say, not that I know it's planned, like Klopp told me, and it's good for our show, but it's like, because obviously it's a still picture, we can't really show the video anymore, which is fine. But what happens now is the ball goes wide, and Tsimikas actually comes across to block the crosser and does a good job. But you see where James Milner is in that central position there. excuse me, he almost becomes a centre back because Van Dijk moves towards the left side to protect Tsimikas there and become a second defender in that left side. And then Milner is blocking that space in between. So that's where I see that, and I kind of think to myself, it may be something that actually is happening in the training ground. There's a little plug there. But like it's something that I think that we're maybe moving towards to try and block those spaces where we got hurt last season in counterattacks or in just defending in general.
Absolutely. So I wanted to show something very quickly. It's very similar to this in terms of the idea of compressing everything. It's something that was one of Rafa Benitez's favorite, one of his favorite catchphrases. Compact. So he used to love that. So what I might do is I might show you. So some of the things that we saw with regards to. Oops, I'm giving you guys a bit of a. I'm cheating there, showing you guys something else. But that's the idea of things being close together. I mean, if something's closer together, it's going to be a lot easier for us, to pass the ball to one another. It's going to be a lot easier to defend. Like you said, we're using the compact thing from Rafa Benitez. He used to love the idea. Didn't he call it the blanket? You should be able to, I don't know, put a blanket over everybody or something along those lines. Which
is funny because there's a picture coming up soon on that.
Oh, there you go. Similarly, with the defense being compact, this is something that I actually tweeted this photo, and you can see my mouse here, can't you? Yeah. So this is something that happened. This is for our goal, essentially. We brought this up on the pre-show. I said that Jota is going to score a scrappy goal because Norwich actually, they conceded a lot of XGA, so a lot of expected goals against. A lot of expected goals against, but they never conceded from them, which suggests that there's a lot of scrapping going along and they get the ball away at the last minute. So Trent does this early cross, something that you said that we would profit from. And then it's Salah who miscontrols it, but something that we know from Jurgen Klopp, especially from his Borussia Dortmund days, is he doesn't care how he gets the ball in the box. It's just that he gets it. And so, I mean, there's obviously the legendary kind of thing of, does he actually plan to lose the ball far forward so that he can get it back quickly and then score? It's kind of like they actively search for opportunities to lose the ball, and then it's kind of like win-win. If you lose the ball, it's a win because you win it back and score. If you don't lose the ball, you score because they can't get the ball off you. He's created a way to have a win-win. But in this situation, I reckon the key reason why we score from this situation is the proximity of the front three. It's something we saw when Liverpool were really successful with Firmino, Mane, and Salah. And the fact that the Salah miscontrols it, it's a little bit of a heavy touch, whatever. Jota's right there to pick up the scraps. And just in case Jota does something wrong, you've got Sadio Mane right next to him. This is something we didn't see last season. We would have seen them really, really stretched and far apart. And now we're seeing them all in the same box together, which is fantastic. And then we can see here again, this is for the actual goal that we score. Before this, though, this is the counterattack. This is the counterattack for Firmino's goal. He actually plays the ball into Sadio Mane, who has like a scuffed shot. Same problem. It's Mane with a mistake. But Jurgen Klopp doesn't care if it's a mistake or not. I mean, the fact that Salah is close enough to mop up the mistake, and that's what happens here, is Firmino gets the ball to Sadio Mane here, and then Mane stuffs up and then gives the ball to Salah. And then we get in this position. You can literally see Mane eating grass here. But look at the proximity of them. All of them are, if we're looking at Mane's head instead of his whole body, he's technically in the box. So literally all three of our players are in the box again. And that's what you want. And that's something I really, really enjoyed from the Norwich game, was the idea that for the first time, I feel like since the whole of last season, we're seeing our front three. I mean, albeit it is against Norwich, a newly promoted side. They're still getting their bearings, but we didn't beat the newly promoted sides that easily last season. And this is how we can just get easy points, an easy 3-0 away victory. This is the way to do it. Get your front three in front of the box and just wait for a mistake and pounce on it.
We also lost 6 games in a row last year, and again, some of them to banana clubs too. So it doesn't matter if it's Norwich or not, because we've seen that we struggled with that all last season.
Absolutely. So there are just a few things that we kind of found interesting. I mean, there's the inverted fullbacks. We've got the idea of the inverted fullback is like an accordion. When you squeeze an accordion in, it gets very, very compact. Going for the Rafa Benitez thing, the blanket idea. But the back four is also compact. When everything's more closer together and the team is acting as a unit, there's less space. We're less porous, so we're not like things can't slide through. And at the same time, when we're going in on goal at the front with the strikers being close together, we can mop up. And it's not to say that you can't use width in attack. Obviously you can, but when we're trying to counterattack and trying to do things quickly, you want those front three close to each other. So there are a few things that we noticed from the Norwich game, but now we're going into Burnley. We're kind of thinking, can we take these advantageous things from Norwich into Burnley? But one of the things we need to do is we need to look at Burnley first. So what we thought we'd do is we thought we'd do what we did last week, which is looking at some very, very in-depth tactical statistics, and also looking very, very similarly, looking at some screenshots of Burnley, because we can't use the video. So we've watched the video in our heads. We can maybe paint a picture of it for you. There's no copyright against imagination, world, so deal with it. Pete, shall I add something of yours to the stream? Are we going to go for the stats first, or
let's go to the Google Doc sheet that we kind of collaborated with?
Okay. So what we're going to have here is we're going to have some statistics and stuff about Burnley, and it's their averages against all the Premier League opponents last season. So we'll get this up for you now. Can you see that, Pete? You're my eyes for the moment.
Yep, now it's up. Oh, look
Beautiful.
at that! Look at that beauty! Look at that art. That's art.
It's art. It's beautiful art. Look at that. So as you can see here, the blue at the top is going to be Burnley, and the bottom is their average opponents. So as we move across here, we can see all their stats. This is something that we had for Norwich. If you can see here, you can see my cursor, can't you? If you can't see my cursor, I will use my pen. That's goals and expected goals.
That our very own Statman Stubbs would probably be obsessed with. We might have to send him some of our work as well. Yeah, he might love this.
We've got to get him on the show. But that was something we looked at last week. Now Norwich's was almost a factor of double. Burnley, it looks like, I mean, it's 2 tenths. I'm using the F1 terminology there from Formula One racing. They love using the word tenths. It's about 2 tenths difference, which means that they pretty much concede what they're expected to concede. So there's nothing really important there. Pete, was there a particular stat that you wanted to talk about first before I motor
Not so much
along?
Talk about but I actually enjoyed the recoveries in terms of, obviously where they had won the ball more than they had lost the ball, or the other way is, where they did lose the ball more. So, do you know what I'm trying to say? Remember that one we had a look at?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
so
right there, that one. Recoveries,
Recoveries
both,
and losses.
recoveries and losses. Yeah, both.
So this is basically saying, so this is the one that we're looking at here, losses, low, medium, and high. The thing that we're noticing here is that Burnley don't lose the ball low. They lose the ball medium, kind of, but that's where they're losing the ball the most. They're losing the ball high up the pitch. What does that tell you?
Hoof it.
They boot the ball long. They're not like Norwich. They're not trying to, it doesn't mean, if you're Manchester City, you probably don't lose the ball when you're faffing around with it at the back. But with Burnley, we're seeing that they're getting up the pitch quick, and they're losing the ball up the front. They're not really trying to build up in any particular way. Of course, you can kind of see that when you watch Burnley. Against Brighton, Pete, did it kind of, were they kind of hoofing it a bit in that game?
Yeah, there's some, actually the game against Brighton, it was a funny one because the first half, they should have been up 3-0. Again, getting the ball quickly high up the end and working off the main striker and then feeding the late runners through. But the second half was all Brighton. And that's where I'm just like, we don't know what kind of Burnley we're going to face this weekend, but those stats do seem to tell the truth. And actually, the stats are there versus Brighton, so it's it does seem quite true to the game that I saw.
And then this is this other thing here of where they're recovering the ball. They're not really they're not getting the ball up high, so maybe that suggests that they're not pressing up as much. So this is their recoveries. Total recoveries average. They're low, they're medium, and then they're high. And they're not really recovering the ball as much up there, which suggests that they maybe sit off when the other team's got the ball and they wait for them to come into this middle third, which is that 35. That's when we see them actually trying to recover the ball. So Liverpool are probably going to deal with the same old Burnley, something that's a team that maybe sits back in banks of 4 and 4. maybe with a striker coming in to make a bank of 4 and 5 instead of 4 and 4. And then that lone striker, the number 9, he probably comes back and defends. Maybe it's a 4 and a 6. But something that can there was something that was also interesting here. They don't like counterattacking very much. Look at this. This is interesting because, despite the fact that they're sitting back a lot, they only counterattack an average of, what's that? 1.4 counterattacks per game. And then they only get does that make sense? Is that a thing? Does that sound like a real football game? And then you see there 31% success rate, but people like to counterattack against them. So the only thing I can see what's happening there is that and we're going to see this with their set pieces. They love a good set piece. So there's an opportunity to get at them from the set piece and then counter against them. That's what that tells me. I don't know about you, Pete.
Well, they are very good at set pieces, and I think it's Westwood. I think that's the right one. He's quite deadly on a dead ball. So, especially in corners, that's just how they scored against Brighton. But I think that stat said also most opposition teams counter 3.31 times per game. So,
yeah, go on.
They definitely concede counterattacks, and that is because potentially maybe you're right. Maybe they just don't like to press, and whilst the other team has the ball and it's classified as a counterattack, they're setting into shape, maybe in their defensive 4-5-1 kind of shape. I just hope that I wish it said. Did it say how many successful counterattacks ended up with a goal, or is that something that it didn't say?
It did. Successful counterattacks with a goal. Hold on. With a shot. 1 point. So 50% on average. So one in two counterattacks against them. Someone will get a shot off. And again, if our front three are in and amongst each other when we do those counterattacks, we can end up with the similar goal that we scored against Norwich. Remember, that's a scuffed shot from Sadio Mane that ends up to Salah. If Salah's not close to him, we don't have that front three attacking in unison. If we've just got, because what we had last season, I made this joke with you before, Pete. How many times do we see like Salah scoring or something like that and he's on his own and it takes the whole team about like 30 seconds to make it to Salah because it's this long counterattack? Salah's good enough that he can maybe score a couple of those goals on his own. But in the Norwich game, when Jota scores and when Firmino scores those two goals, the front three are immediately hugging each other because they're so close. A good indicator of how close the front three are is how quickly they can celebrate with one another.
Or Firmino fly kick someone.
Yeah, the sooner you see a Firmino fly kick, the more you tell that our front three are working together closely. But this was one thing I was going to see crosses accurate. It seems like that they're working on crosses, so we can expect to be bombarded with that. However, if we've got Van Dijk in the middle there, we saw that he was he not the most successful aerial duelist against Norwich?
Yeah, and I think he was, obviously, before he got injured, I think he had the highest percentage in terms of successful aerial duels won. So when he's playing, and not to mention Matip is a beanstalk himself, so I think we're quite safe in that department.
Absolutely. And then there was just that thing about long passes. Per game, they're attempting, it seems here, more long passes than their opponents. It looks pretty average. You look against Liverpool, this is the last game we played against them. This one here. That's 68. And these are the percentages, by the way, for those who don't know. But they attempted more long passes against us, but they weren't as successful. So only 55% compared to our 61. So against us, you can probably predict they might do something similar. Hoof the ball long. It doesn't mean they're going to be as accurate, but we had Nat Phillips and Reece Williams. I think we had there was a stat here, by the way, that said it was somewhere in this document where against us, we won way more aerial duels than them. And that kind of gives you a suggestion that not only did Nat Phillips and Reece Williams do really, really well if they were the centre-backs that started that game, but it suggests that there it is, aerial duels won. Look at that, 65% for Liverpool compared to 34% for them. So it's good that we dealt with it, and we've got Van Dijk back there. Perhaps it means we'll deal with it even better.
And Matip, again, I'd like to mention Matip because it's one thing. I think that's one of these underrated skills. He's quite good in the air, Matip. He looks lanky and he looks like the gust of wind would blow him over, but he's quite reliable in the air. So I think, like, again, with the two of them side by side, I think it's I think we should be able to deal with their main threat, which we'll discuss, I'm sure, in a minute.
Absolutely. And this is really interesting. Their passes into the final third are not very accurate, but their progressive passes are accurate, which means they like passing the ball forward, but when it gets into the box, they're not as good at it. So maybe that suggests that perhaps they're crossing. They're doing a bit of hit and hope when it gets into the box. So Liverpool can kind of, maybe they can relax a little bit in the middle of the park. Not to relax, because they've obviously got a high percentage when they're in the middle. But when they get into the final third, it doesn't seem like as much of it is coming off. Look at their opponents, 70%. So they're kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, behind the curve a little bit there in that regard. I don't know what if that's reading too much into it, Pete, but it might suggest that they're good at knocking the ball around, but then it's a bit of hit and hope when it comes to the final ball.
Or it could just be simple. Once their successful pass is into the final third, hit their main striker, the target man, and then the next pass after that isn't so successful. It could be a couple things. Yeah, you're right. But it's something that we noticed they do quite a lot. It's a 4-4-2, but almost like a 4-4-1-1, because they keep that second striker just off the main one, and they hit the furthest one, play it back to the second striker, and they try to play off that most of the time.
Well, I think that might be a good segue into what you've brought up for us here. Is that what you wanted to kind of move on to? Because we did want to discuss their defensive shape. Because
that's really good. Yeah, we could do that.
It's really interesting. I mean, this is probably the next one, because one thing that we just discussed there, I mean, on average, teams like to counterattack against Burnley. It's interesting, by the way, Pete, that Burnley are such a deep sitting side, yet you can counterattack against them. And again, I think that's because they commit numbers to their set pieces, because they're thinking this is the only way we're going to score. Or maybe when they've got the ball in a wide position and they're like, if we've got the ball in a very high percentage spot on the wing, let's commit midfielders to the box. And then that's the 3 or 4 times per game. That's what we saw in the stats, that they get counterattacked against. But this is them defending a counterattack.
And I actually think Brighton score from this counter-attack. But again, the clip, I've gone blank from the clip, but I'm pretty sure they score from this counter-attack. But it's actually Basuma who busts in through the middle, carrying the ball into the middle third there, where it's something that we spoke about. We'd love to see our midfielders do more, funnily enough. And the ball is played in here because the right fullback is caught out of position, and the winger, which obviously if that's Salah on the weekend, I mean, good luck because he's gone. So that's something that was that I found interesting during the game, that their first goal actually came from a midfielder driving through into the space. And obviously the defenders here, the back four at Burnley, have a decision to make. Do they keep dropping off, hoping that one of the midfielders catch up, or do they squeeze up and try to put the pressure on the ball carrier? And if they do, obviously anything can happen from there. But they continue to sit off, which continues to leave the space for the wide player. And then the goal comes from there, from another cross to a cutback, which is something that we've seen us do so many times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the very and can you remember? I mean, because we don't have the video, can you remember what situation this is from? Is this just a normal Burnley attack?
This is Burnley attacking, yeah.
So they just a normal attack. They didn't not a corner. Was it a cross or anything like that?
No, it was just a normal Burnley attack. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So then I'll show you the next slide that I had found, which is them defending across. We've seen probably Tsimikas or Mane in a very similar situation on the weekend. I'm sure we will. And they deal with this. Burnley deal with this quite well. But
that's the ball up in the far left, isn't it, by the way?
Yeah. So what I highlighted here was more so the circle kind of represents a Jota space, something that we've seen him in for sure, or maybe, Firmino arriving late. But as you see, Brighton's players are actually quite too far out from the box, or too disjointed in the two that are only in the middle. So there's spaces there that I'm sure that we can exploit. And even with the arrow for me, is something where maybe Alexander-Arnold can enter a late run, which is obviously one of the harder runs to mark. Or it could be, who's playing right-sided midfield that day. I'm assuming it's probably Thiago. Maybe it's him making a late run. I'm not too sure. But I've just highlighted those two areas there that I think that we're a lot more clinical in, as obviously more compared to Brighton.
What's really interesting? This slide, what you've brought up just now, when we played with Harvey Elliott in friendlies in preseason, Elliott was in the circle and Salah was in the arrow. which is very interesting. So that's
and it could be Salah there, yeah.
It could be. I mean, if too many players are committing themselves to the center, then literally Burnley or whichever team is defending won't be able to pick up whoever's coming out on the wide. And remember, that spot where that arrow is, if I'm not mistaken, Coutinho assists for Mo Salah for his debut game, and his debut goal was it against, was it Watford? When we win 3-0, and Salah comes into that arrow spot, and that's actually a header that he scores. Is that right? Am I getting that right? I'm pretty sure
I think
that was
Salah's
his first
debut goal was off a Firmino finish, like a scrappy Firmino finish. He just taps it in.
Or maybe I'm thinking of a different goal then, but he scores a header from the far post, and I think it's Coutinho that puts the ball in for him. So we're talking really, really long ago. But Salah's not. He's not shy at getting it at the far post.
No, and like I said, that's something that, again, maybe the next slide kind of shows a similar picture. And like, again, that could be just overthinking things. But again, it's also, if you have a look again, only one Brighton player in the box, with obviously on the far side, the wingers making a late run, but I think he's almost too late. Whereas we've kind of seen Mane will kind of be near the edge of the 6-yard box in this situation, because Mane is so good at making that late run at the back post. How many goals have we seen him score like that? It's, and again, I just think there's key gaps in pivotal areas in the box that I think that with our attackers anyway, we can definitely kind of hurt them with. Again, we've seen Firmino Jota spaces popping up all over this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And again, Trent in that situation with that much time on the ball, Trent can put it literally anywhere he wants in that situation there. So I think if our front three, as you mentioned earlier, are quite close and not disjointed, I definitely think, again, these situations, if we can get into these situations quite often, I'm sure we can hurt them with.
And this would be Trent on the ball right now, ideally. Yeah. If that's Trent on the ball, then we've got space. Yeah.
I'm only saying it's Trent because I'm not comparing us to Brighton. I'm saying us in general. We end up in this situation so many times throughout the match, and a lot of the time it's Trent in that position there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would be great for us if that is Trent, because if that's Salah, he can't really deliver the ball there, and then Salah's not in the box. You also notice there's the doubling up happening there, which will happen against Salah and Trent. There's usually doubling up on his side. It doesn't happen so much on the other side, but you notice there's two players there closing down the crosser. So Burnley and those types of teams aren't... It's not a new thing for them to just do the simple thing and double up on the danger men. And what Liverpool need to do is just make sure we've got as many danger men as possible, because you can't double up on all of them. And hopefully that's a little pocket of space that Thiago can work with if he's the one next to Salah. And again, it's Naby Keita and Thiago, usually a creative midfielder that loves playing with Salah. Not to say that Henderson and Milner or even Wijnaldum in the past didn't enjoy that, but they were a bit more utility-based, a little bit more box-to-box. But when we get those midfielders who want to be more progressive, we found Naby Keita loves playing with Salah. Thiago really enjoyed it, and Harvey Elliott is basically he's become his little brother essentially. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see who is that RCM, that right center midfielder, that can maybe work with Salah, and that's that little space he can also exist in. Harvey Elliott gets the ball just again in preseason, just below where that where the corner of the box is on the right hand side there. That's where he can exist, and we've seen him hit the bar, hit the post. In that sort of position, so he can kind of mold himself into a Coutinho. We're not going to see Elliott do too much against Burnley, if we assume he's not starting. But even from there, Thiago, we've seen actually Thiago work in that space as well, Pete. In the past, we've seen him, play some little like sly passes, some kind of back heels and whatnot. So Thiago does enjoy that space.
Yeah, and again, I would love to see a midfielder make a late run in this situation here. I think that's something that we don't do enough of, and we haven't seen a midfielder score as many goals as we'd like since Coutinho days and before him, Gerrard and stuff. But I'd love to see like Naby Keita, for example, in these situations, just get into the box, because I think if you have on that picture there towards the end of the screen near the referee, I think that's a midfielder there. And in my mind, you're too far away from the action. And you're not doing any favors. You're not doing us any favors there. So the back four, obviously, maybe another midfielder stays back, and you set up with maybe 3 or 4 players still to defend the counter attack. And Burnley, we know that to go forward. They're not that dangerous. They're kind of hurting you from that far away from the goal. So, I mean, Manchester City can hurt you from anywhere. We can hurt you literally from anywhere. And Chelsea of late under Tuchel can definitely hurt you from anywhere. But, Burnley, take a bit of a risk. You know what I mean? Get some bodies into the box and take the game to them. So that's something that I would definitely hope to God that we do a bit more of on the weekend.
And take the chance, because we can see they're not the best at counterattacking. So hopefully, I mean, it's a big chance to take Liverpool. We're getting counterattacked for fun last season. But against Burnley, Burnley traditionally just looks like they're not very good at it. Famous last word.
Going back to your blanket approach comment, have a look at this picture here. Is something I also found that Burnley often like to set up in a 4-5-1 when they were defending. So here you could almost kind of throw a blanket across the whole Burnley team and cover them all. So this is where we're going to have to be a little bit creative as individuals, more so against Burnley, especially at home, because they're not going to. This is while Burnley were at home and they still did this. But they ventured forward a bit because their fans were getting behind them and their fans were putting a lot of pressure on them. So they did take risks and try and venture forward. But they're going to come away to Anfield. They're not taking any risks. They'll be sitting like that, 90% of the game.
This is kind of what we're looking at here. That's what Liverpool fans are used to seeing. That's like the Atletico Madrid approach. Atletico did it with 5, if I'm not mistaken. They did it with 5 and 4.
5-4-1, yeah.
5-4-1. This is the 4-4, maybe 1-1. I mean, that's their striker there who's pressing the ball. That means that their number 9 must be just off screen, I'm assuming. So even their striker is behind the ball right now. Is that correct? That's one of their center forwards, or one of their
That's one of them. That's one of their center forwards. Yeah, and the other one is, again, because I couldn't get the whole thing in, is near the kind of halfway line.
Near the halfway line. So they're essentially they're defending with 4 and 5, and that's what we're used to. This image that you see right now is what you're going to see on the weekend, and that's why we've kind of got a tactic board coming up when we start using our little boards with the formations. This is the generic Burnley defensive shape. I mean, I think it's fairly safe to say that, especially if Liverpool have 70% of the ball, if they're constantly playing around with the ball where the ball is right now, we can assume that this is what Burnley are going to look like, more or less.
Yeah, and I'll show you quickly before we go to the tactics board, just 2 pictures. It's only 2. From the last time we played them at home. And this is the game we lost. And it's just, again, just a setup in a situation. It's just what they do. Because obviously we saw pictures previously where I said Trent could do some damage in, and kind of here he is again in that same position. They're just flooding that middle area, trying to block, runs or a cross or something. But if that little red square that I've got there, this is what I was trying to say before in the last picture. I'd love to see a midfielder just pop up there. Let's stroll in while everyone thinks Trent's going to deliver it, centrally, try hit Mane, Firmino, Jota, whoever's going to be playing. Just a late run from Keita, Fabinho, Thiago, whoever plays, I really don't care. But just a late run into kind of a little bit of space where everyone's attention's on the ball. Have a look at all their heads, all looking at the ball, what Trent's going to do. A late run there, you surprise them all, and you put it into that top corner to the left, and it's a goal. So,
well, unless you're stuff. Well, most of our midfielders are right-footed, and unless you're Steven Gerrard, you can't curl a ball like Gerrard against Marseille. You can't curl a ball from here into that top left corner. So that's why I always say here, the future for Harvey Elliott is really bright, because that's that position we get, because I think Trent is our most dangerous deliverer of a pass, and Mo Salah is our most dangerous attacker. That spot that you've pointed out there, we've seen that spot be open in many, many games, and that's where Elliott can make a name for himself. I think early on, again, this doesn't have to be the Harvey Elliott show, and he's not even going to be playing that much against Burnley, but that position, if Elliott can just learn to get the ball out of his feet, take a look up, and curl that one anywhere near that far post, it hits the post, it hits someone's butt, it hits the keeper, it goes out for a corner, there's a chance on goal. So that position is really, really handy for a Harvey Elliott. What we need to do now is we need to figure out which one of Thiago, Milner, Henderson, Keita. I would say, actually, despite the fact that he hasn't been very good, I'd say Oxlade-Chamberlain is one of the best players to get the ball there for us. And we've seen him score from around that position. If I'm not mistaken, against is it Man City? He scores not from that exact position, but it's a similar shot, right-footed, going across the goalkeeper down to the left-hand side, something along those lines. But also, Fabinho can get...
I think Thiago will be more than capable with his technique to just bend one into the back post there, though.
Hopefully.
That's something
I hope so.
And we've seen Fabinho score absolute screamers, so I'd love to see his.
I was about to say Fabinho with a laces shot. We've seen Fabinho doesn't really like to caress the ball that much when he's shooting. He likes to laces it, but go on.
Speak of the devil. Here we have Salah in the same position where the ball is there, and obviously Salah with his right foot is as bad as, it's terrible. But at the end of the day, it's still a position of danger. And again, have a look at all the Liverpool players. We're all kind of central, trying to get that cross in and see what can happen near the 6-yard box. But again, two little circled areas where a late run could potentially do some damage. And in particular, not so much that little circle there, it's the big one. Because while everyone's running back towards the goal to try and defend the cross, all it takes is a cutback and the ball's got away from all of them because they're all eye on the ball trying to get back to defend that, flood that kind of penalty spot / 6-yard area. And a late run from Fab there or whoever it is, doesn't really matter. And they've got a free shot on goal. That's what I'm trying to say. I just think when teams want to sit back and be so stubborn, I think that a late run from a midfielder or whoever it is such a pivotal kind of movement to try and disjoint such a structured side.
Absolutely. And I think we can probably see now, it looks like we're kind of making a bit of a call here to say that maybe it's a third man run. If Liverpool are going to have some joy against Burnley, it's going to be some third man run from midfield. Do we want to have a quick look at the tactics board to see how all this translates visually? Because we're visual creatures, aren't we, Pete?
Yeah, we're very enthusiastic about our work, to say the least. So you're talking about this bad boy right here, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is, as we go on, we've kind of given you guys a little bit of pre-Norwich. What did we do well against Norwich? We've kind of given you, what does Burnley do? What are they? How did they go last season? We would have loved to give you more stats from this season, but it's only a day old, or a week old, rather. So we kind of gave you a historical look at what Burnley have been like over the last 12 months. What kind of Burnley can we expect to see? And then we kind of looked at how they performed against Brighton, and then how that suggests that their setup might be against us over the weekend, considering their historical tactical setup and also what they did last week. From that, we kind of want to look at now, how are Liverpool going to set up to kind of defuse anything that Burnley might throw at us? First and foremost, we need a starting lineup, and that's what we've got here. Is this something that we're predicting here, Pete? I haven't had anything to do with this, but I have a feeling you kind of think the same way that I do.
Well, I just think the midfield definitely has to change, especially at home against such a structured side where we're going to need a very disciplined performance. And I think Fabinho, we saw the difference when he came on against Norwich. Fabinho came on, the game changed completely to our favour, and we knew the game was over the second he came on. I think Fabinho has to start this match. I think Keita starts again because of his defensive efforts and the amount of kind of like not just tackles made, the regains, interceptions. I think he did really well in that role. And at the end of the day, when you've got a player like Thiago, I think Henderson's still 1 or 2 weeks away, or one more game. I'm sure Henderson will play versus Chelsea. You can almost, put my left leg on that. But I think until that game comes, I think Thiago slots in here and becomes the commando in the middle of the park. And
it's interesting you mentioned there, because when we were looking at Norwich beforehand, we noticed there were high possession, high press. So James Milner, I mean, for all the things that we say, 36 years old and whatever, I tell you what he does really, really well. Gets out of a challenge really well. So he's press averse, surprisingly, but also in that kind of middle of the park, he wouldn't have to have dealt with as many aerial bombardments as what Burnley's going to give you. The reason why it's great to have given Fabinho that rest in that first week is because Fabinho can come straight back in here. And what have we seen already? Burnley don't like to slow build up. They like to pump the ball long. And if Fabinho, 6 foot, what is he, 6'2", 6'3", or 6'1", something along those lines, is sitting there and he's the one, kind of going up and jostling for a defensive header, that's who you want. You don't want anyone else in that position. So I think it's absolutely perfect. It's a perfect game set up for Fabinho, because we know Burnley are going to try and hit us long and try and hit us, maybe try and exploit spaces between the centre-backs. And that's where maybe Fabinho, as he often does, acts as that auxiliary third centre-back and snuffs out, what do they call him? The octopus or the vacuum
lighthouse
cleaner? One of the two. Huh?
There's a lighthouse as well. He's got a couple of names.
He's a lighthouse. He's an octopus. and he's a
The
vacuum
Hoover?
cleaner. He's the Hoover.
Yeah.
I think they called him the Hoover. I think Joe Gomez
Yeah.
called him that. So that's yeah. So I fully expect Fabinho to come in, and then
And not
of the
just
two,
that, if
yeah.
I was just going to say the holy trinity between Fabinho, Matip, and Van Dijk is just like as you mentioned before, aerial dominant and physically prepared. So I just think, I think you're 100% correct with that with your approach on that, because I think he definitely needs to play, and not just because I don't want Milner playing. It's just he has to play.
It's going to be sacrilege. What I'm about to do now here. If you can also open up that tactics board so I can have a bit of a play with it. But this is going to be absolutely. I'm going to be roasted for this, but I'm not sure what happens in this kind of position. But like we were saying, we did say that there was this potential space here. Was it just here that you said that there could be some joy? Dare I say Oxlade-Chamberlain could be handy there? Ooh, dare I say that? Whoops. Did I just say that, Pete? Did I just say that Oxlade-Chamberlain could potentially be an asset for us there? That would suggest I might be saying he might need to start. Ugh, how dare I?
If you're going to base his performance on Norwich and say he deserves to start, then maybe we should just stop the show, because he's got that's like I said, for me, he's my 7th choice midfielder in this club, in this team. So I just thought, if Thiago's fit, we know Fabinho's fit. We know that Keita's fit. If Thiago's fit, it's got to be Thiago. It has to be Thiago.
Do you think, by the way, that this could be Firmino? I have a strange. I mean, the thing is that I think I'm about to take the words right out of your mouth. Firmino starts Chelsea. So
yeah, I think so too.
Maybe
yeah.
I've just answered my own question, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's probably a good time to keep Jota on, because he also came off on 60, kind of influence kind of waning a little bit. And he's a fox in the box. It's kind of strange. He looks like not contributing a lot, and then he comes up with a goal. He's just the utility. He also had that run against Norwich where he beats about 6 players and runs the whole way. And then it's Cantwell who takes him down outside the box.
Down,
yeah.
Look, I like the idea of Jota starting, because I think Jota, he offers something a little bit different. He's a bit more in these situations, like go forward. He always he's a bit more direct and go forward in these situations there. And I think to target Tarkowski and me, just to kind of get them on their heels a little bit, get them running, turn them a little bit, get them in behind as well with Salah and Mane, who are so good at doing the same thing. Then why not in the 65th, 70th minute, bring on Firmino, who will do the smart running that will kind of just really mess with their brain, and offer something a bit different that maybe, because if I bring up this, where are we? This board here, let's go into the ugly thing that we all going to have to look at, which I hate looking at this, but it is what it is.
That's what's going to happen.
What we've done here, we've kind of created this picture where I reckon 85% of the game is going to look like this. It's I know we don't have a ball on the pitch just yet because we're going to have it anyway. But it's like, I just think that in these kind of moments here, I think while Jota is going to be that fox in the box, as you mentioned earlier, off the crosses and in the wide areas where he can find those dangerous spaces, I think what we need to also realize with our main man, Firmino. So let's get Jota out for a second. And let's get C. Senor on. I think what Firmino will do so well here is kind of move these two and make these two kind of make a decision. Do I follow this madman, or because he might end up here, and these guys go, well, what do I do? Do I just go 50-50 just in case? And then hopefully we see that run and then into the space created, or it's Salah that will come in and take that space there. And that's something that we can potentially see and even work. And we also know how good Firmino is in the air or off crosses in the box as well, coming and arriving late. So I think that's something that we can work with. It's more so the midfield three for me, that what they have to do in this situation is really, really key. And a lot of it has to do with Salah rolling in, Alexander-Arnold taking that wide area, and maybe Thiago just offering that outlet help while Fabinho becomes the restart man. And obviously, if he has to come out and go the other way.
Absolutely. And then obviously one thing that we really want to see all the time is, like what we saw before, we do want to see this situation where those three, even if it is Firmino coming in deep like that, we just want to, it's kind of like they're all holding a piece of string. And when one does that, that means Mane's string, he's kind of brought him over here. and then Salah's there. And if Firmino pushes up there, then that string can kind of go out. We want to see them kind of, in and amongst each other, so that if a mistake is made, we can that counter press, there's that counter punch. And we were talking about this in preseason, the fact that everything is a bit further up. And you know what? Sometimes it's actually even a bit more like this. We actually find them a little bit deeper. And when all that happens, when they are deep, we do see Van Dijk with the ball here and Matip with the ball there. So if everything gets brought up just a little bit further up, the less space there is, the easier it is for us to press. So that's really important. Again, like that accordion, we just need to squeeze compact, as Rafa Benitez says, not just in defense, but in attack. But we are going to also look at, I'm sure there is also a board for how it will function in defense for us. Them attack. I love that.
Yeah, they attack. Yeah, look. It's here. It's if I can just get a ball on the pitch, not like they're going to need it. Where'd it go? Has the ball disappeared from us? Has it? So
you have to drag it on. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, there it is. So when maybe they'll do one or two passes here. If they're lucky, they might do a third one. If they're feeling confident, they might do a fourth one. We're not too sure. But it's from here. It's very simple. They hit the furthest man. And then off this man becomes the second striker trying to clean it up, play off him, and then it's a late run from midfield, and then in here, and then another late run in there, and then hopefully they can either get the ball in these areas here or it goes wide, and then it's all about getting those numbers into the box for a cross. And then they'll set up, obviously a guy protecting the area there. Maybe he would adventure a little bit, and then really that's all we're going to get out of them. It won't be too much different than that. And that's something that, as I quickly reshape it just a little bit, I'm sure that you're going to mention what I think you're going to mention in terms of how we deal with that and who can deal with that and how lucky we are that we have this person to deal with that. Am I getting that somewhere close to that, George? Or
I'm assuming. For the purposes of being live here, I wouldn't want to get it wrong. I'm just assuming that if they're going to do something long, then someone in the shape of Van Dijk can hopefully deal with it.
And there it is. I wouldn't be surprised if they play off him, by the way, because I reckon that Sean Dyche is a bit of he thinks he's a genius. But anyway, I'm sure they're going to play on his lack of match fitness. And I don't know, maybe call me crazy. I just actually think they're going to target Van Dijk and really try to put the pressure on him.
Mm-hmm. And also keep in mind, a lot of jumping and landing, it's pressure on the knee. I mean, it's a lame thing to kind of say, and it's kind of like trying to find problems where there aren't any. But at the end of the day, I mean, like you said, if they're going to try and work Van Dijk, think of the ways that you're going to put pressure on the knee. We know that Van Dijk can he can shuttle through games, he can kind of just waltz through them. But it's very difficult to get him up to a canter, up to speed, because he's so good at reading the game. Where you can actually put pressure on him and tire him out is it's kind of like you think about like video games and stuff, or like the movies where you've got the big monster, you take out the legs kind of thing. It's like with Van Dijk, just get that leg working, and that's going to be when he's landing on it. So maybe early on it's interesting because you would never want to test Van Dijk in the air, but if Dyche is going to target if he's going to try and target Van Dijk, I'm assuming that's the way that you can get at them. I hope I haven't given them a hint there. I'm pretty sure they're not watching this, so don't worry about it. Liverpool fans watching this, that information is safe with us, I would assume.
And yeah, man, that's all I've got in terms of as much as I can say about Burnley, because there's not much to say about Burnley, not because they're just a boring team and they're a piece of shit of a team too.
Yeah, well, this is what, before we come on to our predictions and wrap up the show, this was something that was, as you were saying all of that, we noticed it from those stats from last season, and also we noticed from that Brighton game that we're not sure entirely if they concede a goal from that counterattack. And you said it was just from an ordinary attack, and it suits our research, by the way. The fact that Burnley do get countered against more often than their opponents. Like, it's something that it's strange for a team that sits so deep, they get countered against. And the reason for that is like what we always say, Liverpool are at their most dangerous when the other team has a corner. So it's a really strange thing to kind of wish from a game. But when you were setting up just then, when you were talking about how they're going to get in, you were using actually can you bring that screen up again for me so I can have a look at it? You were saying this whole thing of this player gets the ball and then he's the one that kind of goes there. I think when Burnley get into this position, when everyone's kind of getting advanced, when this starts happening and the fullback is kind of, I think they get really excited because they're like, this is our only, I think that's what they do in training. This is our only chance to score. So they kind of, it's funny because we always say they don't commit men forward, but if they get into this, they've probably learnt, if you get into this 1 out of 25 scenario position, so it's like they're going to be in like 24 other scenarios. They're like, fuck it, we're not doing anything here. If they get into that magic moment, they flood the box. And I don't want this to be the reason that we score, but it's kind of like that's a chance. It's not our only chance. It's a chance for us to break against them. We saw Brighton do it. We see from the stats from last season, they love a good counter against them, and they're not very good at countering themselves. So I don't know, something that as we go into predictions for the game, perhaps it's off a corner that we score for them, like we off their corner, or it's one of their attempted one scenario situations where they're like, let's just commit to it. And Liverpool are like, thank you. And then they just run down, front three are all together and we get some amazing counterattack goal because we know Liverpool have been working a lot harder on counterattacking this season. Hopefully it kind of works out in this Burnley game, Pete.
Yeah, and Liverpool don't forgive. Liverpool don't forget. Neither do I. And I'm going to predict a 4-0 thumping.
Oh, that's a great score to predict. I'm going a little bit boring and going 2-0. I just want us to be keeping clean sheets here. I want to say it's a clean sheet. And I mean, I'm going to go even further to say, I love your third man run thing. If it's 4-0, put it this way, Pete, if it's 4-0, we get a third man midfielder scoring. It's an Oxlade-Chamberlain, it's a Keita, or it's a Thiago, perhaps. Maybe even if Elliott comes on. If we're winning 3-0, by the way, and Elliott comes on, I think he does something with a shot in that position. That's another little...
I hope to God that way we can put that in the bank as well as the training ground bank.
The training ground bank. But I have a feeling off a corner or something like that, maybe a counter off one of their opportunities, that might be Liverpool's ticket to just opening the floodgates. Once those floodgates are open, we saw Burnley, like you said, you said despite the fact that they are, that they were at home and they had the crowd behind them. Like you said that they were still sitting deep, but with the crowd behind them, they kind of pushed a little bit. Not to say they will have a crowd with them in this game, but they will find reasons to press ahead. And if they're 1-0 down or something like that, maybe even 2-0 down, because we've learned 1-0 down, other teams think we're still in this because we can get the draw, and a draw is a win. So Liverpool have to be careful at 1-0. They have to play the game safe. And maybe we could have, I don't know, in another universe, we could have looked at situations, what Liverpool do if they're 1-0 up. But there, we're going with something in between a 2-0 and a 4-0 win. But if it is 4-0, like Pete says, I reckon we'll get a third man midfielder doing something quite interesting. Anyway, guys, that's been our training ground. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Pete, you enjoyed that?
I did. And one thing we got to mention, which I think we forgot, was that this is not live. So if you're trying to make a comment and it's not working, don't take it personal. It's not live. So once you've watched the show, we're jumping on Monday, where we are live on Monday nights for the Down Under show, and just drop a comment like you have been lately, because they've been so enjoyable, by the way.
Absolutely. And by the way, while we were live, we had a whole host of Twitter followers come over and convert into our YouTube subscribers, and that was really, really great to see. I think we saw 10 subscribers or so jumping on just in the span of our broadcast. So please, again, like, subscribe, turn the notification bell on, go to Red Sea Podcast. That's going to be on YouTube. You can always follow us at the Red Sea Down Under. I actually didn't do any of my tickers. I didn't do any of my banners today. We just got straight stuck into the content. So maybe next time I'll do these banners.
We're just there. We're just up there. We're just going.
These ones just as training ground. Yeah. That's all I had prepared for that. And maybe, you know what? As we're going, just this little thing here. Follow us at the Red Sea Down Under. That's where you can follow us on Twitter. But for now, I've been George and that's been Pete. We're predicting hopefully a Liverpool victory, but maybe this gets you excited for the weekend, because Pete, man, I'm excited. Are you excited?
I just can't wait to watch something. I mean, I'm sick of lockdown. I'm sick of all this stuff. We're just not doing anything. So at least every Saturday now we'll have something to look forward to.
And as Jurgen Klopp said exclusively to the Aussies all around the world that get up at 2:00 in the morning, if you are an Aussie watching this, he said, I hope that when we do this, it puts a smile on your face. And Liverpool, you really have been doing that lately.
Yeah, of course.